Brett Wingfield here once again for the Matuska Taxidermy Supply Company, Thursday afternoon live, Facebook Live, and we're probably going to be kind of rusty. We've been on vacation for a long time.
Yes, we have.
We've had a lot going on. I think the first thing that we skipped out on was the National Taxidermy Association in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and that was a pretty great event. That was well done. High quality work. We thought there was a lot of exceptional work. People came from all throughout the United States even. A lot of, I mean, we had Utah people, we had New Mexico people,
Montana,
Idaho, Montana, all over the Midwest, East even. So that was well attended, and we set up a pretty, we thought, spectacular booth display, and it was kind of fun. And I gotta tell you that we took a lot of the office personnel out because it was a close show for us. It was only 90 miles away, so it was easy for us to, get them there. And they got to meet taxidermists that they talk to every day, but have never laid eyes on. And I think that had to have been the highlight of the telephone bank and of the office personnel that talk to you people every day. So if you manage to get out to Sioux Falls and talk to any of our girls and ladies that answer the phone for you, I know they were thrilled, and they thought that was a pretty spectacular thing for them.
Yep. And we did a walkthrough for them.
Oh, we did. We did a great walkthrough. Went through, and you can see that on YouTube, I think, or on our Facebook archives. And it's kind of hard. There's so many, and you're so overwhelmed. And as you walk through, you try to say something about every one of them, and it's just hard to come up with words. And if we missed anybody, the first thing we heard was the minute we didn't mention somebody's mount, they said, "Yeah, I figured I wasn't going to get a ribbon because you didn't say anything about my mount." It was because we were overwhelmed when we went through there. There are some of the most creative people that I've ever seen, and creative mounts.
Neat stuff.
Habitat Galore. Great work.
Creative stuff, creative pieces that I think more artistry than I've seen in a long time throughout.
I thought so too.
All of the divisions. All the divisions it was nice. It was really,
the funnest
really nice
thing for me is to go through and think, wow, I saw this, I saw that, I saw it all. And we will get back to the booth, and somebody will say, "Did you see the one with?" And I go, "What are you talking about? I never saw that. It wasn't even in there." "Oh, yeah." And I go in, and it was one of my favorite mounts, but I didn't see the whatever it was on there, We just went to also the, where did we go? Oh, Missouri Taxidermy Show. And somebody had a pair of bobcats, really neat, young bobcats, jumping, and it was a very neat, really, really, really clean piece. The bobcats were groomed to perfection, and we got back to the booth, and I mentioned the hawk wing. There's a hawk wing in the snow, just a dusting to make it look like a shadow, and it told a story where the hawk is flying over, and the bobcat saw this moving on the snow, and it spooked them, and they're up in the air, and it was, the whole thing told a story, and that's part of the artistry also. So
that's fun. That's always fun when you can.
So you got to do a good work on the animal, and some people get carried away with their extras too. We have gone to shows where somebody has a deer rubbing on a tree with a little scent thing hanging, and there's a shotgun shell in the snow, and there's a boot track, and there's a no trespassing sign. If you're gonna compete, make it classy. I think don't overwhelm everybody. Yes, we saw this, and yes, we saw that, but and all the stuff at the Nationals was pretty darn well done.
Impressive.
I mean, even the kids and the novices, the beginning people and the young people. Oh my gosh! I would have liked to have started out like some of those people at that age. There are some youngsters that are doing very well. And then, after the Nationals, I was all by myself because you went to Alaska.
Yes, we did.
You and Holly went, on an all-expense-paid trip to
We ate a lot of expenses. We flew into Anchorage, and we fished the Kenai, and we fished the Susitna, and we had a great time.
Caught fish too.
We did. We caught fish thanks to Mark Wilson.
Yep.
Mark was very instrumental in helping us. We stopped in and saw Russell Knight, Knight's Taxidermy. So it was a good time. It was a fun time away from the heat here. It was nice and cool up there, and we got out of the shop a little bit.
And you brought up a couple names. First one, Mark Wilson is a past graduate of the Northwest Iowa School of Taxidermy.
Yes, he is.
Also, past president of the NTA, of the National Taxidermy Association. So that's kind of special for us.
Yep.
And Mark is also a tremendous person and a traveling nurse. Did I say that right?
There. Yep, he's up there on assignment in an OR working in Alaska for the majority of the summer.
Sure.
I think Terry just came up, and so that was fun.
And Russell Knight, who you've all seen on Mounted in Alaska, he was kind of the MC for the National Taxidermy Association, and it's always fun to see Russell, and he talks well in front of people. He's kind of a fun person to have, up on stage.
It was super fun to go see that operation. They have quite a business up there, so that was fun. And then I got to go fishing with Holly for a week.
Sure.
And that was an adventure.
We had an adventure anyway.
We had fun. We had lots and lots of fun, so thanks to her.
Yep. And then, while you were fishing, we were in Missouri, Lake of the Ozarks, down with the armadillos. We saw lots of armadillos on the way home.
And it was nice and cool, like Anchorage in the Ozarks.
97 degrees with humidity like I'd never seen. They can't, I think their water level can't go down because it's always wet. There's no evaporation down there. But a beautiful place, beautiful resort. The Missouri people were super gracious to us. Again, we put on a big display for people, and it was a good show. That was another good show.
Always,
Really high caliber of work. The Missouri people, I think there's a lot of very talented people in Missouri that are willing to share what they know with people that are coming up through the ranks. Yeah. And anytime that you are trying to get information and somebody won't tell you something, just call us and we'll call them out on the air. When I started, you couldn't find out what size wire to use for a wood duck save your soul. If you asked any taxidermist, what do you paint your fish with, or where do you get your wood, or what do you, it was a secret. Nothing was shared. And 40 some years later, everybody shares everything. And if you listen, pay attention, practice what they teach, there's no reason that you all can't be doing award-winning work and have an award-winning business, because all the information nothing's hidden anymore, and the products that everybody sells are way better. We started out with paper forms. There was no making a paper form bigger or smaller. You either stretched the skin or added a bunch of clay, and if you were doing a deer and it was way too small, it was going to weigh 50 pounds more when you got done, because it was all built up with clay. There was no styrofoam in those days, and most of you people that are in the business now didn't go through that. But it was a struggle, and to stay in business while you're working with paper mache forms. I know there's some listeners out here that would probably text in, but that was you didn't have to be good, but you had to be creative and thoughtful and try to figure something out.
Yeah.
So I think with that, the last time we left you, we did fins. Did we do fins? And then we did the back of the fish.
Yep. I think we did a seam. We finished off the seam. We can show them there.
And this we did Magic Smooth.
Yep.
And Magic Smooth is a real goopy epoxy that we don't use it a lot. it's an exceptional adhesive. If you need a glue, it's like thick jelly kind of when you get it mixed up, only twice as sticky. It's like hardened honey, I think. And it's great for seams. We used to finish our seams with, I used to use auto body putty, and I would finish them over in auto body putty, and then I would take a sander, I'd rasp them and then sand them, and it made a real pretty contoured seam on the back, but they all crack. This skin is continually stretching and contracting. It never stops. And somebody says, how do you get your, fish skins to not crack? Concrete cracks, I mean, things affected. Humidity, moisture in the skin. Some people finish them a little quicker than they probably should. Might be the product you're using, but auto body putty has no adhesion, adhesive strength. Yep. So when the skin moves maybe a 1/100 of an inch, you're going to have a little hairline crack. And so there are different products you can use, but Magic Smooth is one that we found over the years that works well for us. So we like to do that. And as soon as one of my rules in the shop, and we've done this forever, the minute that this is hardened, the next day, we take this tag, we look at whose fish it is, and we write that person's name in a little marker right across the back of the fish. Yep. And then when we paint the fish, oftentimes we'll take a little piece of masking tape and stick it right over that name so it doesn't get painted out. And sometimes we don't know whose fish that is till it's all done, and we peel the sticker off, and then we can see the name underneath. So always get your name on there. That way, if this tag's likely to fall off by the time we get done. Yep. And then we showed you how to do fins, and we showed you how to do flexible fins. These fins we showed you were like brittle as butterfly wings, and now they're real nice and flexible. And you can build them up to any kind of a thickness you desire to make them real strong. Just don't take out too much texture. So a walleye has a big coarse textured fin. The fin rays are real heavy, so you can put on, I don't know, what would you say? We use Mod Podge on this. There's a lot of good flexitives, but 4 coats?
I think it could do 4.
And you could even do more. Just don't take away the texture. If it were a little rainbow trout or a little sunfish or pumpkin seed or something like that, 2 might start to take away your texture. And then sometimes I will put it on the back and not put it on the front.
I have a question from Greg McOwen, and Greg is wondering how you store your fish skin, what the difference is between skinning and mounting if you run out of time.
Just the skin.
Yes.
Freeze them, right?
I would think,
If it was a long time, like say you're going to mount it tomorrow, we would just put it in the refrigerator. And some fish you can fold up or let them ball up in a bag and it won't hurt them, like a pike or a muskie. Some fish are you're not going to hurt them by letting them fold over on one another. Some fish, like for instance a crappie, make sure you lay them very, very flat, and we'll put them in the fridge for a day to 2. Yeah. We like to skin fish in massive amounts. Just as long as we're skinning fish and we're smelling up the shop and getting dirty, just keep going, Yeah. So we will skin fish. We'll make the pattern, take all the measurements, and then we will skin that fish. And we found that salting them, we take salt, like you'd salt your hide, same kind of salt, sprinkle them with salt, and lay them in a plastic-lined tub, nice and flat. And the next one, we'll put another one on it, another one on it, another one on it. And we'll probably get maybe 20 fish worth in a tub. Every night we put them in the freezer. And when we go to do fish, we'll have all our bodies carved. And we'll go down to the freezer and we'll just, because they're salted, they never really freeze. And you can separate them. They're not froze together. So we'll just grab a handful of fish skins, bring them up, and start mounting fish.
Easy to take them out and put them right into a pickle.
Sure.
Let them thaw out in the pickle or warm up in the pickle.
And you could pickle them in advance of salting. My thinking is the salt stiffens the skin, you lose all your elasticity, and they may shrink a little bit. But if you put them back in cool to room temp water, little bactericide in it, or your fish pickle, they will come right back to it. That all you got for us?
That is at this moment.
Okay. Now there's a whole lot to do with this fish. We still need some more coats on his fin, probably. We got a couple of walleyes here. You'll notice that if you're new to fish, there's nothing you can do to skin out way up in here. I mean, I'm sure it can be done and people probably do it, but realistically, our skinning stops at the skull, and we cleaned out the cheeks through the eye hole best we could, but still there's a tremendous amount of shrink because there's so much cartilage in a fish, I think. There's a tremendous amount of shrink through the bottom jaw, the mandibles, the top of the head, his bronchiolostical rays. I mean, he shrinks so much his mother would not know him. And so you can do one of two things. You can put eyes in, seal him, paint him, call him good and paint him, and a lot of people do that for their customers. There's no rebuild. We try to make them, put them back a little closer to real life than he is right now, and we like to do that by rebuilding the top of the head. We're going to set eyes in the eye sockets. We're going to rebuild all of these little areas, but you don't know what to do because he's all dried up. So a lot of people make the mistake of, they said build this up. Let's put a whole bunch of epoxy, and we're going to use epoxy. We're going to show you some different epoxies. And they'll say, they told us to build this up. So they start packing, and pretty soon you have something that looks like a fish from Nemo, Finding Nemo. So you got to be real careful. You want to do it, but less is best. Don't make the mistake of, because we said to rebuild all this, don't start packing. It's very helpful to have, and we need to do this for them someday. This one's been dropped, and he's really got some shrinkage here. But this is a walleye cast that we made a mold of a walleye head, and with that walleye head mold, this is just auto body putty. We poured auto body putty in there, pulled it out, and the closer to fresh this fish is, the more detail you're going to have, because even a dead fish, though he hasn't been air dried like this, is going to shrink a lot, correct? So anyway, just looking at this, I can tell, first of all, we're missing a couple eyes, and I can tell how much this has shrunk. Now, this also shows signs of detail, and I can see these extended cartilage bones, little cartilage ribs up here. I can see them, and this was a fresh fish. So I don't want to make him a helmet up here. I want to make sure I put all those back in. Nostrils are all shrunken and very large. These are much smaller and meaty around there. The mandibles. So something like this is very, very handy to have. In addition to, we do a lot of photography around here, and this is just a walleye head that we laid him on the dock and took a picture straight down. And the best thing this is good for is depth of eye set. I kind of like that.
Yeah, that's a very good one. Very, very, very good picture. And that's a live fish, so even though we don't have him three-dimensionally, there's a lot of information there in that photo that you get that you might not get from this, even though that's fresh, he's still dead.
Okay, now, we got a lot to show him.
Gosh, we do.
I think the next thing, and we'll try not to lose you here, but you got to select some eyes, and a lot of times when we were teaching students, when they get home, they're not going to know what size eye to buy. You know, they're going to go to the catalog and they're going to go, man, 16, 18, 14 millimeter, I don't know what to get. And they're going to look at their fish, and the first thing they're going to do is take calipers and they're going to measure here, and they're going to order them, and they're going to get either way too small or way too big. what I always tried to tell them was, once you take the eye out, as it's, if you can get it out in one piece, put a little bit of pressure on it and measure the iris size with the calipers like this. So if you measure the iris size and it says 20 millimeter, if you look in the catalogs, the iris is 20, but the overall base size, they call it, the big part, like, let me grab one here. Here's a 20 millimeter. The iris is 20, but the overall eye itself is 24. So if you ordered a 24 millimeter iris, you're going to have a fish big enough for a dolphin.
Yep.
So you're going to want to look at iris size and base size. What can work when you're really unsure is measure your, we've done this before, measure your hole, your socket size, and subtract 4, and that can be your iris. And that'll get you close.
Gets them in the
not as good
neighborhood,
as measuring the whole eye. So anyway, measuring the eye is a good idea. There's all kinds of different eyes, and we won't expand on it a whole bunch, but I'll run through some really quick. If you like painting your own eyes, we have Jeff Lumsden's Still Life eyes, and they come clear, or they'll come with a black pupil. I mean, a pupil, you can get either way. They are really, really, really fun to paint, and if you go back to our archives, somewhere we painted eyes, and that's probably one of the funnest things we ever did.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're even kind of real. Zoom in on this. These babies are neat. I'm going to hold real still. Okay? But we paint these a lot with our Pearl-Ex powders, and we paint them with liquid scales and metallics and other colors and an airbrush. They are just like really, really fun. I'm going down, down. Yeah. There we go. Now I bet if I go that way, no, I gotta go this way. Anyway, they're cool.
They are. They're very cool. Very, very cool.
We need to have a little string, like a garage, like when you pull into your garage and you got a little tennis ball that you have bump. You're gonna have to have that so I can hold the ball out and hold it there. But I could get carried away where I couldn't make a penny on a fish because these are so fun to do. I could spend hours painting fish eyes. And you paint them on the inside, in the back, and then you can paint your golds and silvers. And, they're really, really fun. But you have to come up with a system, and you have to be able to make two the same. An eye that we use a lot in the shop is a flex eye. Flex eyes are by Wayne Cooper, and they're actually a silicone rubber eye and a real thin plastic here. Come in different species, and you order them by millimeters, even sizes. And there's iris size, and there's a base size. And when you look into in the catalog, you're going to see there'll be a little chart, and it'll say iris and base. Another thing people got to be concerned about is eyes are not round either. And eyes are typically a little more, many eyes anyway, are more oblong. So when you look in the catalog and it says a 14 millimeter eye, is that this way or is it this way? You're usually safer going the length. That way you end up with a slightly smaller eye. So you'll want to know, you want to be conscious of that. There's inexpensive glass eyes that have very little scleral membrane, not much of an eyeball around it. So you may have to make that out of epoxy. We, a long time ago, the flex eyes seemed to be running big for us, and they didn't really run big. It's just that the rubber in the scleral band was actual size, which really falls behind the whole side of the socket. So we made this one time. And this is just extra eyes we had in the shop. And I can take this and I can hold it up here, and I'm going to say, ooh, I'm going to need about a 20 millimeter eye just by holding this up there. So this was a big help, especially when we were teaching students and we didn't want to open up a lot of packages of eyes for them. So if you are using all flex size with your extra eyes, just make even millimeters, which is kind of handy. So the first thing we want to do, I think, is I'll grind out a little bit of this clay, and then we'll talk a little bit about setting eyes, and we'll stick them in, and then maybe you can show them how to build up the top of the head.
Sure.
I just have a Dremel with a Cuts-All bit. We use a lot of Cuts-All bits because they're carbide and
They last.
they last forever. You never have to get another Cuts-All bit. You can take that bit and you can throw it into a tub of lacquer thinner and it'll be good in the morning. So I'm just going to get some of this clay. Usually, if you try to make a socket big enough for the eye and you scoop out some of that clay, as the fish dries and contracts a little bit, your clay ooshes out where you didn't want it anyway. And this may make a bunch of dust, but now I'm not gonna make my eye socket any bigger. I'm just going to go get the clay out of there.
And one of the nice things about the clay that we've used in this is the white porcelain fish clay. It's very soft. So if you were to have used the white critter clay, would dry the same, but that's like grinding concrete. So this softer fish clay, this is where it really shines. Makes it much easier to remove.
You know, you mentioned the white clay. For years and years, we used regular dark potter's clay, and the dark potter's clay worked good. It's soft. You don't need any strength in here. You need a filler. And but it would, especially in walleyes, the skin is so thin here that it darkened up your face.
Yeah.
And so the white porcelain clay is a big help to us. Okay, now I dug out down behind this cheek, and I'm going to take an eye here. I'm going to see, make sure it fits in here. I want a loose fit. Oh, that's loose enough to fall in perfect. Now, you probably should be doing the eye angle talk.
No.
Fish to me are a little bit like birds. If you take a fish and hold him like this, you correct me if I say something bad, so we don't steer them wrong.
No.
If you hold a fish out in front, you should be able to see, next fish you catch, you should be able to see enough pupil that you can tell he can see you. Is that a true statement?
Right, absolutely. Yeah.
If you cannot see any pupil, your eyes are set too far in or they're tipped too sideways to the fish.
Yeah.
Just like a bird. Hold a bird in your hand, and even though they turn their head for a really clear view, they still can see straight ahead. Not as good as a bobcat, but well,
Right.
they have tremendous peripheral vision, so they got to see back there also. So as you set your eyes, you're going to want to have something for depth to go by. And I don't know if you can see this picture. It might not be. Can you see that? You tell me where to go. And now a picture like this shows me the depth of the eye set. And if you fall anywhere close to this, your customers are going to be thrilled. And also, I'm going to put it up again. Notice how they're, I'd call it toed in at the front corners so that he can see forward slightly. But notice also how he can see way behind him at that big muskie coming after him.
Yep.
Okay, now we got to talk about epoxies. And maybe I will start, and while you're rebuilding up this for them, I will tell them more about epoxies.
Oh, sure.
That way you can be working, and I'm going to use Fix-It Sculpt. Fix-It Sculpt is a 2-part epoxy, and we have a lot of epoxies, and we use them for different purposes.
Fix-It Sculpt is a really good all-around epoxy.
We've used
we use
it
it for a lot of things.
And you call it the Lamborghini
that
of
that
the
was
epoxies?
Dave, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, any of these epoxies, equal amounts. You can use rubber gloves if you're worried about your hands. We've never had much issue, but whoops, some people do. It's just like 2 bread doughs, and I'm going to dip it in a little bit of water, and that keeps it from sticking to my hands. Now, you're going to see a marbling effect here. You want to make sure that there's no marbling. If there's marbling in there, keep mixing, because you'll have hard and soft spots. And what would you say you have for time for Fix-It Sculpt?
I would say you have probably 40 minutes to work with it. It's going to start to get stiff after that, 30, 40 minutes, but it won't be cured for a couple hours. I wouldn't try to sand it for a while.
And when we were teaching students, we always had, you got to cover all your bases. You got to tell them everything, because they've never worked with this before. So you got to make sure they don't mix up a tennis ball and a tennis ball, because this is much too much probably for this process, and you end up wasting it, because if you can't use it within 15 minutes, it's going to start changing its consistency. And
yeah, unlike any epoxy, the heat, it will kick faster with heat, and I think the heat from your hands, just working it, some people will work it, and then even as they're working on it, they still have the remainder of it in their hand, and that heat causes a
So I have a real nice white Fix-It Sculpt. And now I'm just going to line the inside of my face here. Now, I think my size of my eye opening is not too far off, and so I don't want to put it in so much that I can't get my eye in. We're just going to take this eye. Now, your eye will be pear-shaped, typically your pupil, and so we're going to put that point forward. And now I'm just going to look at him, and now walleyes can have a pretty bulgy eye. I need a little bit more. And then anytime, when I say they're a bulgy eye, sometimes laying on the dock flopping around makes their eyes bulge. Sometimes, there's a lot of different reasons that their eyes can bulge. Make sure it's a natural protrusion and not a frog.
Catching them out of 60 feet of water. Now, when you removed, how much material did you remove from the cheek? You were in there with the Dremel tool.
Enough to get, I like that eye to go down underneath. That eyeball is, in a real fish, is much larger than the socket.
Sure.
But because it's gushy, you can get it out through the opening, but it really did protrude underneath the whole rim. Is that right?
Yep.
And so you want to have room to be able to push it down a little bit under that rim. And then I'm adjusting it with my finger, forward or backward. And sometimes I'll take, depending on what kind of eye, sometimes I'll take a pin and adjust it. So now I'm going to look at this picture, looking down from the top. I think I could work with that. Now don't forget that remember we said a couple weeks ago that measurement back between here, this shrinks up a lot. So realize that this is much narrower than what it was in real life. And then also, we'll look at this. And I think his eye could go, I got it tipped a little too far out. And I think I can work with something like that. Then, I'll let you finish this, but I'm just gonna lock it in place here by putting a little epoxy. Now normally, we do the same to both eyes, get this one set, that one set, and then kind of compare them, but for time, I think we'll go with this. Is that
Sure.
okay?
Absolutely.
And when you're not explaining, I will tell them more about different epoxies.
Perfect. Well, what I'm going to do is rebuild some of this shrunken area up here on top.
Want me to mix it
Tom
up?
had noticed. Yeah, I need maybe another one of those worth.
Got it.
So you'll notice there are some ridges here from the cartilage or skull that are protruding. There's a little hole from skinning. There's just little bits and pieces here that are sunken in. We need to go back to our reference, and we're going to use a cast of a fresh fish to know how much shrinkage there was here. And if you look at the profile from the top of the head through this transition, there's not a lot of shrinkage. There's some. So we don't have to build up a big thickness. We just have to take out basically where he's dehydrated. The water, gosh, fish are made up of what percentage of water? Make up a number.
Somebody said 90%,
Yeah.
90% water. Like if you leave a large piece of fish meat on the table overnight, by the next day it'll be half that size. 3 days later it'll be a fourth that size, and it just keeps shrinking. There's a lot of moisture
Yeah.
in fish.
And I think that's what, even though this is all cartilage, there's no meat up here. I think that's where the shrinkage comes from, is you're losing all that moisture. So what I'm going to do, and try to show you, I'm going to turn this, Kate, you might have to bear with me for a second. I'm going to adjust this guy carefully. Remember, we put that rod in here, which is kind of nice, because now we can adjust the fish angle slightly. Can you see the top of that head from there? Maybe. Yeah, there you go. And now I'm just going to connect this upper region to the upper portion of the eye and come back here. Now, one thing that can help you, you may have some little bits and pieces that are a little bit raised. We can hit those with the Dremel now. We had just a little spot there. We'll level off. You can go over the whole thing if you need to. Most of the time you don't need to too much. And now I'm just going to take a spatula and start blending this in. I don't know, Tom, what do you think? I think one of the most important parts of epoxy work is how well you feather your transitions from where it stops and starts. And I think that's...
Kind of like an auto body shop.
Yeah, yep, exactly.
Some of our best people we've trained worked in auto body shops, and they know how to feather a filler of any kind onto the natural finish.
Yep. You might have this texture off, you might have this shape slightly off, but if you're feathered in and people can't tell where your epoxy starts and stops, nobody's going to question you. But if you've got a great big wad of bubble gum on top of his head that they're looking at, they're definitely going to ask, what's that? So that's what I'm going to work on first, is just blending this in. And I'll do that with a lot of pressure and a little bit of water. I'm just using water to keep it like you did when you mixed it, just to keep it from sticking to my fingers.
A wise person once said to me, the most powerful tools you have for doing this kind of work are right here.
I don't know how wise that person was.
That was you.
And then definitely wasn't. That's funny. But now we're just going to work this in slightly. There's, if you notice on your reference cast or photographs, there is a membrane that connects the top of the skull to the eyeball itself, just a real thin membrane. So we're going to rebuild that, feather it onto the eye, and if you're working with an eye that has the scleral band already included, you can feather right onto it, or some of you may have to, if you're working with glass eyes, you may have to build that scleral band. But I'll just work this and try and get it smoothed out and blended. Do you want to tell them about
Sure.
some of the different epoxies?
One thing I want to mention is tools. I see you using a little chrome spatula tool.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what you use as long as you can, yep, your magic fingers. But just to mention a few, you can get nice little sets with all kinds of, like I got a little spatula here too, and it's all covered with epoxy, but they're just very handy to feather things out. Eye tools, the same eye tools that you use on your game head work can be very helpful here. Everybody laughs at me, but these little bamboo tools, I can't do epoxy work with my without my little bamboo tools. They're kind of fun. And then also, don't forget about good paint brushes like these angular shaders, filberts. Once Brett puts detail in there, these are very nice to dip in water or whatever material you want to smooth that out with, and kind of soften all of your tool marks. You don't want him to look like he was, sculpted with an axe and a hammer. You want to soften all those hardened tool marks. Another one that works really good is any of you that have used the water pens. This is a water pen that we use for tipping scales. The bristles stay really nice and moist because there's water in here, and we have used those to soften our detail too, water pens. Yep. But it doesn't matter, whatever tool, you can make your own. I used to have a lady here that worked here, and she made every tool. She'd take a little piece of oak over to the sander, and she would fashion all kinds of wood tools.
Yeah.
And as far as smoothing, everything reacts a little different with a different smoothing material. You're using water?
I'm using primarily water right now with the Fix-It.
And another one is alcohol. Alcohol with a lot of these epoxies works very well, and there are some of them that only work with alcohol. Mm-hmm. And alcohol is like isopropyl alcohol that the nurse puts on with cotton when you get your little COVID shot and stuff like that. But alcohol can work real good. And another product which you want to be careful with, but it does clean your tools and works good for smoothing, is safety solvent. Too much safety solvent we find turns our epoxy a little too soft and mushy, but it can be a great asset when you're smoothing parts out like this. Then when it comes to epoxies, we're using Fix-It Sculpt by Aves Studio, and we've used Fix-It Sculpt around the shop. I think primarily we started using it on antlers because of its light color. It was easy to replicate antler material. It's a little bone colored. Epoxy Sculpt, Epoxy, A-P-O-X, is another, made by Aves Studio, is another great epoxy material. I think Fix-It Sculpt is the one that's a little bit stronger, and they both behave similarly. Is that a word?
I think so. It's in the neighborhood.
And there's some new people on the market. There's Ricky Crane's Clay, K-L-E-I. And all these have different colors, different attributes. You just have to get them and see what works best for you. Fix-It Sculpt, like we said, you have about a 15 to 20 minute working time. Clay, I would say you've got under 10, don't you think?
Yeah,
before you better have your shape and start on your texture in about 10 minutes. So I guess for somebody who is more experienced, clay is a great product. Feathers, very, very nice.
And that's one you mentioned, some work better with alcohol, some work better with water. Clay's one that works great with alcohol.
With alcohol, yeah.
Yep.
Easy Carve. lightweight modeling epoxy. Easy Carve is a white material. Mix it, it's very, very lightweight, like really lightweight. Feathers exceptionally well. Works good with alcohol and water.
Holds a texture nicely, but very slow
Slow to
setup
set.
time. Yep.
So you probably have an hour or more before you would even notice any kind of a change in it. And the one thing you don't want to do is, like we said, is don't mix up, you know, a golf ball or tennis ball size of the Fix-It Sculpt, because any of these epoxies are expensive. And clay, because it sets up so fast, be careful how much of that you mix up. But there's just 3 good products that we use in the shop every day. And you can use any of these for eye work on your deer, nasal passages, ear repairs, any kind of a membrane.
Most of them take color very well. You can pre-color them.
And there's different, when Brett said color, there's different resin dyes that you can put in them. Otherwise, oftentimes, we have oil paints. We have a box of oil paints, and we will just run over to the box and grab a little brown and mix it in with one of our epoxies as we're needing it. If you're going to put oil paints in straight out of the tube, make sure you put rubber gloves on, because your fingernails, you'll never get it out from under your fingernails till your skin sheds.
Until you wear them off.
But you can pre-color this, especially the white ones. These 2 are very white. You can color them and try to match the skin a little bit. Works well. Yeah. It's a little bit of a trick, because when they dry different than what you see when you put it on. And it may be the perfect color when you put it on, and it may be darker when it dries. So there's a lot of epoxies, and there's more that we don't even know about, I'm sure. It seems like new epoxies are coming on the market every day.
That's a good smattering of them. And I'm just trying to blend that out for shape. I think I've got it about where I want it. I'll clean up the eye, something very important. Maybe give you a turn here so you can see. Something very important is to make sure that you clean up the epoxy residue off of the eye. Do you have a nice filbert over there?
A little one.
Or a little something I can just do a little cleanup? Perfect. I'm just going to use some alcohol. With the solvent, safety solvent or alcohol, I've even seen people finish with, I used to finish epoxies with lacquer thinner. They eat into your epoxy and make them very soft, which is not desirable if you're going to continue working with it. But you can, if you kind of consider it as a finishing step, just to soften and blend, these solvents work really well. Do a little bit of cleanup, and then we can texture. And the walleye head has a little bit of texture on top. I think you can even see it in the photograph. There's a texture to the very top here, right through this area, that I'm just going to kind of replicate with the end of the brush or a terry cloth towel. Come right down here on top.
Now, something I notice you doing, which you're very, very good at, is you're basically just covering the whole top of the head with a thin layer of Fix-It Sculpt. But in doing so, I notice, I call it a little sight trench, a little sight window that you've put in so the fish can see forward. And on the real cast, it's very, very subtle, and you put it in just out of habit, just because you know that stuff. But for people that don't know, there's a whole lot you can gain by either, don't be afraid to look at a real fish too. If you do not have a cast like this, last competition bass I did, I brought a fresh dead fish out of the freezer, and I would lay it on the counter as I'm building this up. There's a wealth of detail in here, but it's so subtle, and you don't want to exaggerate it, But if you put in like your nostrils and your sight window and little striations down here, and there's just a lot that you can glean from a cast like this.
Yeah,
Or the real
absolutely.
fish.
That's a great point. You mentioned something that I think is probably the most important part of epoxy is not overdoing or over-exaggerating all of these little details. It seems like that happens pretty fast. They get over-exaggerated.
I was at the Missouri show and I was listening to, I think, Tim Grenchen, and he was telling somebody, when you're unsure, less is best. You're going to be
Yeah.
much farther ahead. And I thought, how many times have we used that statement in the taxidermy school? Less is
Yeah.
best.
Yeah.
You'll probably not get in trouble for putting too little on, but you definitely will by putting too much on.
Yeah. I think that'll get them through the tops of
That's
their
pretty
heads and get their eyes set so that they're ready next week for us to keep going with epoxy.
Sure.
Next week. Next week, we're not going to finish with epoxy. We might have somebody special coming.
Oh, gosh. I kept trying to think, what are we doing next week? We have a guest star. We have a guest star next week. We are undecided on the subject matter. Cole Kirkshank from Taxidermy University is going to be our guest star. And Cole is a great teacher and speaker, and I think everybody's going to benefit from whatever Cole has to show us. We'll put together a really star-studded program for you. I just saw Cole at the Missouri Taxidermy Show, and when he's not golfing, he's a great taxidermist.
That golf, that does interfere with taxidermy.
It does for me, because it gets me so down and demoralized I can't do anything anymore when I golf.
Oh, that's funny.
So Cole will be here with us. We're going to probably deviate from the fish. So we're going to take one more little hiatus from the fish. And something was mentioned about bobcats. It might be bobcats, or we might have another.
Golf. How about we do
Maybe golf. Maybe that's exactly right. And so that'll be fun to have Cole here. Cole's a great person, and we taught his dad 50 years ago, I think. Kirby.
That'll be good.
And I think that about wraps it up for today, and we got a giveaway.
Yes.
And we
Do it.
don't have it here, but is it 7-piece?
It is. So it's a 7-piece stainless steel modeling tools. It's our spatula and carver set with 14 assorted tips. And the winner of the giveaway goes to Jarvis Thomas.
Oh,
Congratulations, he's gonna like it.
yeah.
We use those all the time. I mean, like I
do without
noticed
it.
there's epoxy on every one of them that you used, and they were on mine too, and before the show started, I just took my knife and scraped them
Yep.
off. Garvin will clean his up really nice and sparkly after every use, I'm sure. But we couldn't do taxidermy work without these. We
No.
use them for everything.
Yeah.
So enjoy those, Garvin. And next week, we will see you with Cole, I think.